I wasn't really planning on landing it.
That is the voice of a 28-year-old ground service agent sitting in the cockpit of a 76-seat turboprop he has stolen from Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. He has no pilot's license. He has never been trained to fly. He is speaking to air traffic control the way someone explains a change of plans, casual, almost apologetic. Below him is the Puget Sound. Behind him, two F-15 fighters are closing in from Portland at supersonic speed. He will be dead within the hour. His name was Richard Russell. On August 10, 2018, he towed an empty Horizon Air Bombardier Q-400 out of a maintenance area at SeaTac, climbed aboard, started both engines, and took off. No alarm was triggered until the aircraft was airborne. What followed was not a hijacking. It was a 71-minute conversation between a man who had already decided how this would end, and a stranger on the ground trying to change his mind. But August 10th was not the beginning. A year earlier, a pilot had found Richard Russell sitting inside the cockpit of a parked aircraft that did not belong to him, flipping switches in the dark. No formal report was filed. No one asked what he was doing there, and Russell kept coming back to work. The wheels left the ground at 7:32 p.m. Pacific time. The crash came at 8:47 p.m. in between. 71 minutes of flight, continuous radio contact, a wide loop over the Puget Sound, a slow circle around Mount Rainier, a pass toward the Olympic Mountains, a barrel roll in a plane designed for regional commuter routes, and a conversation that never once sounded like the end of someone's life. Russell gave his full name to the controller early in the exchange. He did not hide, he did not threaten. He spoke the way a person speaks when they have nothing left to protect.
Minimum wage. We'll chalk it up to that. Maybe that'll grease the gears a little bit with the higher up.
He said it like a joke. The controller did not laugh. At the time, it sounded like a throwaway line, the kind of thing a person mutters when they know they are about to lose everything and want to make it someone else's fault, even for a second. It was not a throwaway line. It was a summary of something Russell had been carrying for years. But the controller did not know that. Nobody listening knew that yet. What made the recording so difficult to process was not the fear in Russell's voice. It was the absence of fear. He sounded calm, self-aware, like someone who had made peace with the outcome before the first engine turned over. The controller was trained to talk people down. Russell was not falling, he was already gone. Richard Russell was a ground service agent. His job was to tow aircraft on the tarmac, de-ice them, handle baggage. He had worked the job for 3.5 years. His badge gave him access to the airfield, the tow vehicles, and the aircraft. Ground crew entered cockpits routinely as part of the towing process. One person drives the tug, another rides the brakes inside the plane. On the evening of August 10th, Russell's window opened around 7 p.m. The Q400 was parked in a remote maintenance area. He used a tow rig to pivot the aircraft, disconnected the tow bar, and ran. Security cameras captured what happened next. A man in a reflective vest sprinting across the tarmac toward a spinning propeller, alone, no one behind him, no one calling out. He reached the lowered passenger door, climbed inside, pulled the hatch, and threw himself into the captain's seat. The cockpit required no key. Starting the engines involved a specific sequence of switches Russell had memorized. The FBI would later confirm he had searched for instructional flight videos online. He had learned the rest, as he told the controller, from video games. Nobody noticed the aircraft was moving until it was on the runway. A ground service agent with no credentials had stolen a $33 million aircraft from one of the busiest airports in the country. Nearly 2 decades after September 11th, aviation security had been designed to stop passengers. It had not been designed to stop the people who worked there. On the other end of the radio was a man whose job it was to keep planes from crashing. For 71 minutes, he tried to do that job with a person who had no intention of cooperating. The controller stayed calm. He matched Russell's tone. He brought a professional pilot onto the frequency, a man Russell would call Captain Bill, to coach him toward a landing. They offered McCord Field, a nearby Air Force base. Russell declined every time.
Oh man, those guys will rough me up if I tried landing there. I think I might mess something up there too. I wouldn't want to do that.
He worried about damaging the runway. He worried about other aircraft. He asked the controller to keep him away from planes trying to land at SeaTac. Then he said something that made the controller pause.
Damn it, Andrew! People's lives are at stake here!
Russell clarified. He meant the people on the ground, not himself. He did not want to hurt anyone. The controller knew this. The man he was talking to was considerate, articulate, and suicidal. He was not hostile. He was not delusional. He was done. And there was no procedure for that. Then Russell asked about an orca, the southern resident killer whale that had been in the national news for weeks, carrying the body of her dead calf through the Puget Sound. She had been carrying it for 17 days. She could not let go. Russell wanted the coordinates. He wanted to fly over and see her. The controller did not have them. He kept talking. Russell kept answering. About 50 minutes into the flight, Russell announced what he wanted to do next.
I think I'm trying to do a barrel roll, and if that goes good, now I'm just going to nose down and call it a night.
He said it the way a person says they are going to try a new restaurant. The barrel roll, a full 360-degree rotation along the longitudinal axis, is a maneuver that most trained pilots would never attempt in a Q400. Russell executed it successfully. Horizon Air's own CEO would later call the maneuver incredible and say he did not know how Russell had achieved the skill to pull it off.
All right, Rich, this is Captain Bill. Congratulations, you did that. Now let's try to land that airplane safely and not hurt anybody on the ground.
All right. Nah, damn it. I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't want to. I was kind of hoping that was going to be it, you know?
He had hoped the barrel roll would end things. It did not. The plane held, and so he kept flying. What Russell did not know was that 2 F-15 Eagles had been scrambled from the 142nd Fighter Wing at Portland. The jets broke the sound barrier en route. They flanked his aircraft. Their pilots were in contact with NORAD, authorized to intercept, a word that, in military aviation, includes the option to shoot down a stolen commercial aircraft over populated territory. On one side of the radio, Russell was making small talk. On the other, fighter pilots were waiting for an order that would make them responsible for his death. Richard Russell was born in Key West, Florida. When he was 7, his family moved to Wasilla, Alaska. He married young, met his wife at a Christian campus ministry meeting in Oregon. Together, they opened a bakery in North Bend. For a few years, they ran it. Then they sold it in 2015 to be closer to her family. They moved to Sumner, Washington. Russell found work at Horizon Air. He started loading bags and towing planes.
Oh, hell yeah, it's a blast, man. I played video games before, so I know what I'm doing a little bit.
He said the 30 minutes into the flight, laughing. A man who had gone from owning a business to pushing luggage on a tarmac, telling a stranger he was having the time of his life in a cockpit he had no right to sit in. He was active in his church. He led a local Christian youth ministry. He was described by co-workers as quiet. He was described by supervisors as well-liked. On the morning of August 10th, 2018, he walked into work wearing a shirt that read, "The sky's no limit." None of this is the profile of a man about to steal a plane. There was no visible crack, no documented outburst. He was quiet. He was kind. He went to work. He came home. And somewhere inside all of that, something collapsed so completely that by the time he sat in that cockpit, he had already made his decision. The people closest to him would later say they had no idea. A year before the flight, someone noticed. Joel Monteith, a SkyWest Airlines pilot, would later report that he had encountered Russell inside the cockpit of a parked SkyWest jet at SeaTac. Russell and another ground crew worker were flipping switches, pointing at instruments. Monteith confronted them. They said they were learning to operate the auxiliary power unit for towing. Monteith did not believe them. The two men stood up and left as soon as he challenged them. On a separate occasion, Russell had been inside Monteith's cockpit, watching, asking to observe the pre-flight flows, the startup sequence a pilot performs before takeoff. Monteith felt uneasy, but stalled until his crew arrived and Russell left. Monteith never filed a formal report. There was no explicit policy preventing ground workers with clearance from entering a cockpit. Reporting it, he said, would have been a delicate issue, so he let it go. And Russell continued to show up, tow planes, and sit in cockpits that did not belong to him. Richard Russell did not snap on August 10th. He had been rehearsing for at least a year. He had studied cockpit procedures, watched pilots prepare for takeoff, memorized a startup checklist, searched for instructional videos online. This was a man who waited, and during those months of waiting, nobody acted. The fuel was running out. Russell knew it before the controller did.
I'm down to 2100. I started like 30-something.
The controller offered McCord one final time. Russell declined. He asked if they would give him a job as a pilot if he managed to land. The controller said Alaska Airlines would give him any job he wanted. Russell laughed. Then he said he was not going to land, plainly without drama.
This is probably like jail time for life, huh? I mean, I would hope it is for a guy like me.
He said, "I would hope it is," not "I'm afraid it is." He hoped for prison the way a person hopes for a consequence that proves they still exist inside a system that notices them. The controller did not engage. He asked Russell to start a left-hand turn. Russell did not turn, and then he threw up. The cabin was unpressurized. He had never figured out how to fix it. He was lightheaded, nauseous, covered in his own vomit, alone in a cockpit 6,500 feet above the ground, in an aircraft that was slowly running out of fuel. And his first instinct, the thing that came before fear, before regret, before anything else, was to apologize.
Sorry, my mic came off. I threw up a little bit. Hold on. Shoot. Man, I'm sorry about this. I hope this doesn't ruin your day.
That is the line that stays, not the barrel roll, not the fighter jets, not the stolen plane. A man covered in his own vomit, flying an aircraft he cannot land, apologizing to a stranger for being an inconvenience. He said, "I hope this doesn't ruin your day," to a person who was listening to him die. The politeness was not performance. It was habit. It was the reflex of a man who had spent his entire life making sure he was not a burden to his wife, to his co-workers, to the people around him. And in his last minutes, with no one watching except a voice on the radio, the habit held. He could not stop being considerate even when there was no one left to be considerate for. At 8:47 p.m., the Q-400 struck the wooded shore of Ketron Island. The aircraft broke apart on impact. A fire burned 2 acres of brush. No residents were injured. Richard Russell was the sole fatality. The FBI recovered the flight data recorder and components of the cockpit voice recorder. No suicide note was found. The investigation concluded he had acted alone. His death was ruled a suicide. The man who had been quietly sitting in cockpits for a year, memorizing checklists, watching pilots, had flown for 71 minutes and crashed into an island with a population of 17. The flight data showed he was in full control until the final descent. He chose when it ended. He chose where. And then the voice stopped. The entire recording was built on that voice. Calm, self-deprecating, strangely kind. And here, on a wooded island in the southern Puget Sound, it was gone. His family released a statement the following day. They said they were stunned and heartbroken. They did not understand what had happened. They had not seen it coming. His co-workers said the same thing, in smaller words. He was quiet. He was well-liked. He showed up on time, minimum wage. He mentioned it once, in the air, between jokes and apologies. But that line held everything. The bakery in Oregon that he and his wife had built and given up. The move to Washington. The shift from owning something to carrying other people's luggage. The years on the tarmac, while planes he would never fly took off above him. He did not sound angry in the recording. He sounded like a man who had slowly been made smaller and had only just noticed how little of him was left. The FBI said that interviews with colleagues, friends, and family provided no clear motive. A man stole a plane, flew it for over an hour, spoke to strangers with more warmth than most people manage in a lifetime, and crashed it into the woods. And no one could explain why.
I got a lot of people that care about me, and it's going to disappoint them to hear that I did this. I would like to apologize to each and every one of them. just a broken guy. Got a few screws loose, I guess. Never really knew it until now. Just, you know.
He said it somewhere over the water, between the jokes and the apologies. A man who sounded like he could have been anyone. For 71 minutes, he was somewhere he had never been allowed to be, and then he was nowhere at all. If you enjoy dark mysteries and forbidden history, subscribe to the Black Archive.